we as a country, when it comes to automation and manufacturing, we need to raise our standard, which means we need to train everybody. Everybody, should be learning robotics. Like that should be a requirement, right? High schools, community colleges, four-year colleges, everybody should have access to robots. Everybody should be learning how to program them.
How's it going? Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm your host, Malachi Greb. And if you don't know who we are, we do all things automation, manufacturing. We're an automation company at heart, but for our podcast and our social platforms, we're educating people on their careers. So the Manufacturing Come Up is a place for if you're looking to learn about career advice, then you want to hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, what all the creators are talking about. And for just anything else related to manufacturing and automation, we're a hub for that. And we have another guest who falls in alignment with that. And I would like to welcome Amolak.
Hello. No, it's great. So, hi, my name is Amolak, and CEO, co-founder at Orbital Composites. And Malaki, thank you for inviting me. I think this is a wonderful effort to educate the next generation of manufacturing superstars.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And I'm hoping to catch a bunch of valuable pointers from you today and be able to share that back with the community.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess if you wouldn't mind starting off, like where are you currently at in your career? Obviously, you're the CEO of a company, which is something that I think is very inspirational from the get go. Um, tell us a little bit about what you have going on.
Sure. So I feel like I'm really one of the most privileged people to be in this position of leading an incredible company, Orbital Composites. And our mission is to democratize advanced composites manufacturing with the use of robotics. And we do this all the way from mesoscale to megascale. And this impacts the most advanced industries and products in the world, starting from the largest structures that we know of, like massive wind turbine blades, or the fastest structures we know, like F-35 aircraft, or the hottest structures like a rocket nozzle. All of these things are made with composites, and but making that manufacturing process easy, fast, automated, so that it can be applied to a large variety of applications. And then really our long-term mission is to take this core technology and also put that in space. We're also one of the leading contenders in this emerging area of in-space manufacturing for space. So you can build massive structures in space without having to launch them. And that can lead to incredible cost reductions to the order of 100 to 1000x.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, then you can change the shape at which you're shipping things and then develop whatever the structure needs to look like out in space.
It turns out it's the same problem even for terrestrial applications, right? Anytime we need to make something big, rather than making it in a factory somewhere, making it over there where you need it, you can significantly reduce the cost and even the risk of transporting these things. And so, for terrestrial applications like wind turbine blades, an interesting example, they're becoming so large that we don't have roads big enough, or our highway underpasses tall enough to ship these blades where they need to go.
Mm.
So it's very important to think about how do we make these things on site, similar to how construction works, but do that for advanced composites. And so it really is the space and terrestrial application is the same challenge. What that means is you need more and more automation, robotics, and advanced software, advanced sensors that allow you to autonomously do these things as much as possible. And then so the people who are operating these systems are really becoming very, very efficient at building these incredible structures. Uh, Today, a lot of these jobs are going offshore because they're very manual jobs, and companies chase low cost of labor. So, if we really want to bring these jobs back to the US, we have to strongly invest in this type of automation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another really cool thing that we kind of briefly talked about off camera was the career fields that are going to open up in space, right? And manufacturing in space. Like whenever that got brought up in conversation, it's like, wow, like that one is one that I can see that like contends with like AI. Like there's a few things out there that I think are going to really disrupt and like take over a majority of like probably maybe 80% of jobs in the next 20 to 100 years, maybe 20 to 50 years. AI is one of them, but I think space is going to be a huge one. Manufacturing in space, and I think it's going to open up a ton of different career opportunities that are some of the similar things that we're doing here. But I think there may be a lot more science that's going to go behind it. There's going to be a lot more logistical challenges in how we get procurements to different locations in space. And I think definitely this additive manufacturing um, adds it's one of the catalysts to be able to help facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, as the name of the company suggests, right? Our North Star is orbital manufacturing. And uh, and the interesting thing is that so the space industry is really going through this second renaissance, right? So we had our golden period of the Apollo era, where we made incredible gains in our capabilities of how far we could go and going all the way to the moon, and then kind of lost that a bit over time. But now that has come back strong because space is sort of the next big $1 trillion industry that provides tremendous opportunities for the United States, but also the rest of the world. And so, if you think about, in the recent years, reusable rockets have sort of opened up the door for in space access to space, right? But I think people need to realize that that's just a first stepping stone, right? You're still limited by how much you can fit inside that rocket body, right? And I use this example. Imagine the forefathers, moving to the U.S., right, and said, "We want to settle here, but want to keep going back and forth from Europe to bring everything, right? That's just not sustainable. So if you really truly believe in humans becoming spacefaring civilization and actually having hundreds of thousands of people working in space, you have to learn how to make things over there. And actually, you will be able to make incredibly large structures and at dramatically lower costs than what's done to date. So it's a very exciting field. We believe it's the next big thing since reusable rockets, right? This is the next big technology jump that will take us from something to the order of 40x cost reduction to like 100 to 1000x cost reduction. And what that means is a lot of the dirty industries that we have on Earth, you have the potential to actually put them in orbit so that you create less pollution on Earth, uh, and you're able to move a lot of the heavy manufacturing jobs up there. And this is why we are building our machines, our robotic systems that are from day one designed to work on Earth, but also in space. So today you could go out, start working with these systems, get comfortable with them, get trained on them, and you're basically future proofing yourself by doing that because as these new space opportunities open up, you're ready already.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure, like all the details that would go into like how do you have a manufacturing facility in space or potentially in Earth's orbit, but I could 100% see a world. where that is the future, or if not in orbit, that it's somewhere like right outside of our orbit, and kind of just floating around out there in space.
So that is already happening, right? So if you, I think most people are familiar with the International Space Station,
Hmm.
which has been sort of these multi-country collaboration over the years. Now it was built sort of one of a kind, so it's incredibly expensive and not really scalable. But what's changing now is that NASA is saying, you know what, we've demonstrated that this can happen. Let's pass this on to private companies. So there are actually several companies, some companies like Axiom Space, Orbital Reef from Blue Origin. There is a Lockheed Martin space station being considered. There is one from Northrop Grumman, and even another company called Vast just announced one. And there's many others actually. So you have a lot of private industry interest in building these floating platforms in space, mostly in low Earth orbit, which is the nearest to Earth, and uh, and they're actually actively looking for applications. You know, if we had such a platform, so Orbital's goal is not to go build that platform. There's companies already working on that. Our goal is to go and then figure out how to take advantage of these platforms and start building the space infrastructure at, again, 100x or more lower cost than what it took traditionally. So if we could build these platforms at such lower cost, then you can build out much more. And that's the first step. You know, it's like, you know, as people moved from east to west in the US, right, we had to have railroads, right? That was the important infrastructure step. And once you had railroads, then you had this mass migration, the gold rush, right? So the space, you can really think of it as the kind of the next big gold rush, where people that are risk takers, that are, you know, that are innovative, that are just, or they just want to do something crazy, you know, they're going to be attracted to these type of things.
Hmm.
And we are building the tools that are useful here on Earth, but also then you can go potentially in one of these big stations, and you could be manufacturing some really advanced things that are actually better to be made in space than here on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like really like the future of our planet, like it should be in our mind to try to get as much as possible manufacturing wise, especially anything that's not eco friendly. We remove it from the planet so that way we can leave this planet to be a very fruitful and very just luscious planet to live on.
Absolutely. So if you look at our industrial revolutions, right, it's built on a consumption model, which is that, you know, we are using resources that are constrained, they're finite, right, and and which is what's creating a lot of these challenges that we're facing over time. Now, in space, not only we can move a lot of our heavy industries where you can reduce the impact of pollution. See, one of the other interesting thing is space forces you to be efficient. It forces you to reuse and not waste, right? You know, you don't want to go be creating, you know, going on the lunar surface and creating garbage, because if you do, actually will create more problems, right? So the space environment is extreme, so it forces you to solve these difficult problems of being circular, not wasting anything, right? I mean, they have to, it's kind of gross, but they have to drink their own pee, right? NASA had to invent, it's expensive to send water up there. So they invented the technology to recycle, right? So there's actually tremendous advantages in doing these things. All these technologies come back to Earth. Uh, and and then it's also inspirational. I think I've had the privilege to talk to a few different astronauts, and almost all of them say the same thing, that when you're up there and you look back on Earth, it's very humbling, because you see this sort of vastness of blank, dark space, and then you see this one sort of little blue dot, right? And it brings you back to really appreciating, you know, it's actually a miracle that we have this planet, right? It is a miracle if you understand the formation of Earth and so on, right? It is a miracle, and so anything we can do to make it thrive, and so space. So the other big challenge on Earth is finite resources, especially when you start thinking about rare earth materials, right? And a lot of conflict and wars happen because we're chasing these finite commodities, right? But see, if you start looking around in space, there's actually plenty of these materials out there in the form of different asteroids, right? And this concept has been there for some time. This concept of asteroid mining, where you can uh, go onto some rock, which is, I mean, for example, let's talk about batteries, right? There's this big shift going on to electrification. Everything needs batteries, and then batteries requires lithium and other rare earth materials, which are kind of hard to mine. And again, there's this sort of conflicts emerging because of it, right? But you go in space, they're available in abundance. Abundance. There's no shortage. So it's actually really worthwhile, as society, to go figure out how to go get those materials. These ideas are not new. What has changed is the technologies are now matured enough that this is the second golden age of space, and these things are going to be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take this thing back just a little bit. What got you involved in being so interested in space?
So my story is interesting. I spent about 18 years in the high tech industry here in Silicon Valley, but on the semiconductor side. And I was very privileged that my first job was at a company called Agilent Technologies. But this company was really came out of the original Hewlett Packard. And a lot of people may not know, Hewlett Packard is one of those foundational Silicon Valley companies. They really wrote the history of Silicon Valley. Originally, not today's Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley used to be actually really deep tech, hardware focused place where a lot of magic happened. So I was privileged, people around me, I was surrounded by incredible people who grew up in the original Hewlett Packard, and so my way of thinking. There's a wonderful book called The HP Way, written by David Packard, Bill Hewlett. David Packard, by the way, used to be U.S. Uh, head of defense, minister of defense in the 80s. So he was quite influential in his career. I learned a lot from them. How do you build an enduring company? How do you build something which is really next, not just a little bit further ahead than somebody else, but you know, we used to use the word 10 dB, orders of magnitude ahead. So I was grounded with that and had a great opportunity over the years between Agilent, Avago Technologies, which is a spin out of Agilent, which ultimately became Broadcom. And I was fortunate to have be friends with what in our industry we call tech fellows, and I knew 4 or 5 of them really well. And after about 18 years in this industry, I'd done everything. I built R&D teams, built sales teams, marketing teams, took new products to market, operations, strategy, M&A, kind of did the entire circle. But really wanted to do a startup always. Because I'm like, you're in Silicon Valley. you have to do a startup, right? Like that's the thing to do here, right? And I actually dabbled into investing. I became a member of a group called Sand Hill Angels, which is a fairly active angel investor group here in the valley. And then eventually met the founder of Orbital. His name is Cole Nielsen, and we met. Our kids went to the same school. That's and we started talking. First time I talked to him, I did not understand anything. He went just way over my head. But I had a feeling. This he reminds me of these tech fellows I know in my industry. The way he thinks, the way he analyzes things, the way he executes, and all of that. So I was fascinated by him, and I just started spending a lot of time with him. And I became one of the early investors in Orbital. But I just, for a couple of years, I just hung out with him. I learned so much. I became really hungry. The more I would talk to him, the more I'm curious. So that is what really pulled me in. And as I started spending time with him, even talking to some of the customers, I started to realize he's onto something really big. I may not understand all of it, but he's onto something really big. And the more, so I officially joined in 2018. And since then, we've made incredible progress. We count US Navy, Air Force, Space Force all as our customers, and we will have Army as a customer pretty soon. And we have a number of tremendous tier one aerospace and energy companies as customers as well. We work really well with the national labs, the US national labs like Oak Ridge National Lab, National Renewable Energy Lab, as well as Sandia National Labs. So we have spent these last few years develop and cultivate these relationships, and and in this process, I've really become incredibly excited about this opportunity to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. And so every day I wake up, I learn something new, and it's also very gratifying to be working with customers who and solve some of these really difficult problems with robotics, composites, automation.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you glad that you made the shift?
I am. I have learned so much in the last 5 years. The rate of learning is incredible, and yes, absolutely. But I would be lying if I said the startup world is difficult,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to hardware, especially when it comes to advanced manufacturing, and you go through your usual days. There is ups and downs, but I like to think about things in longer term trajectories,
Mhm.
and every 6 months we look back and see what we have accomplished. It is incredibly gratifying, and because we know we're having an impact,
Mhm.
and we're having a pretty large impact, and the technologies that we're developing are going to be enduring. The HP way, right? These things are going to last because that's how advanced they are. That's the kind of impact they're having.
Right. Absolutely. What it, what do you think it is that gave you the ability to make the shift or feel confident to make the shift into a newer industry?
That's a great question. I think anybody making such a drastic shift from into a completely different industry, this can be very scary. But I think you have to leave your people struggle with this because they worked so hard to reach a certain level in their previous career, and the lateral shifts are very difficult. Uh, uh, you have to be willing to start from the bottom again. It requires hard work, um, but that's in my life I've moved around so much. For me, I'm very comfortable with change. I think it's a change that people are it's difficult for people to make those. But change is constant, right? And the change is accelerating because of emergence of all these technologies. So I think number one, always be hungry for learning and be open to it. Second, stay grounded. You know, don't think about, well, I used to be this big shot in this industry. Be willing to start again. It's okay. You will actually be surprised how quickly you can start climbing again if you put in the time, because there are many skills that are transferable. You have to learn the domain, you have to learn the specifics of, what that domain is about. But as an experienced professional, there's many skills you will be able to translate. But you have to be willing to be humble and start again, because you're going to meet a bunch of young people that may be way better than you, and you're starting again from, and it can feel very intimidating, right? But again, I encourage people to be lifelong learners, and if you just have that open mindset, growth mindset, you can overcome all of these transitions, and they can be wonderful. They can be incredibly gratifying, because you could actually, get back into that zone. We all remember our early careers when we get into something, we're so excited about it because we're learning, right? That's part of the excitement. So it's all about your perspective, right?
Prior to shifting, you'd already spent quite a bit of time in the industry that you came from, correct?
Yeah, and I there was a lot of skills I was able to translate,
Hmm.
right? So in the semiconductor industry, I worked on many of the scale-up manufacturing challenges in a different context, right? So a lot of those skills are even in the business model side. There's a lot of learnings we take from one and apply to another,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's actually a huge advantage
Yeah.
when new people come from different backgrounds into a industry that might be very stale. They are actually sometimes the catalyst to bring about positive change,
Yeah.
and new, fresh ideas.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been wonderful making this transition,
Yeah.
and I
Absolutely.
wish more people would do it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely you know it's a challenging thing to do. I think it can be very rewarding. Also, too, like just bringing over some of the skills from like one industry to another, like you'd mentioned, that could be very very valuable. Like let's say, for instance, even with automation, a lot of people may not think about this, but a lot of automation companies, like if you look at like total percentage of like let's say at least 50%, right? 50% of automation companies are really they're like a CNC machine shop that became an automation company, or they were a um, controls support type of company that turned into an automation company. And a lot of these companies, especially I see it in the CNC side of things, like that's where their roots are still really at. Like they're a CNC machining company that turned into an automation company, and even if they've rebranded as an automation company, they're still very much a CNC company. And a lot of the things that they're doing internally are, you'll see like a lot of these companies, maybe they won't do things with robotics. They'll do stuff with servos and conveyors and things along those lines, but when you talk about a robot, maybe they won't necessarily get involved in that. And I think a lot of that comes from not having outside influence, right? It's because they were a CNC machine shop and they evolved into a automation company versus I would assume it's probably under 20% of the automation companies out there that started and just said, I want to be an automation systems integrator. I think it's a very low percentage. It's more companies that have morphed from some other type of company into automation.
Yes. So this is a really good point, and there's a lot of transferable skills here. And I think I can give a couple of examples of how, if you're a traditional CNC company, most of them are three axis, right? Just take the next logical step, go from three axis to five axis, right? There's additional complexity here, but it's a good skill to pick up. If you're a 5x, you're already doing 5x's and you've kind of mastered it, right? You're already halfway there to be an automation company, right? And actually, you're also there to start thinking about uh, going from subtractive manufacturing to additive manufacturing. Um, and especially, again, we like robots, so I'm really saying robotic additive manufacturing is much more exciting than traditional sort of additive as we think about it. So you can see, there's steps you can take to sort of go up the stack, and these worlds are starting to blur, right? It's not just about subtractive or additive. It's about actually how do you combine both to achieve the outcome that you need. Additive is still very young, right? It's only, I mean, like 2-3% of the overall manufacturing industry. It's nothing, right? It's this tiny part of that massive manufacturing industry. So there's incredible amount of, now they're growing very fast. So that's where a lot of exciting opportunities tend to be, where there is growth. So again, if you're a subtractive company, you should be looking at how do I bring in some additive capability into the mix? How do I bring in some automation into the mix? Because it's that combined solution where the advantages are going to start. So if you don't evolve, and if you only stay as a three-axis machine, a CNC company, naturally you will struggle. And actually, it's happening. I've seen so many of these like mom and pop shops not able to make that transition. But my message is that it is possible to do that if you kind of take this step by step approach. And actually, right now, today, this may not have been true 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but in the current environment, finally people have woken up and they understand the importance of supply chain assurance, local manufacturing, and why it's important, right? So I think it's actually one of the best times to be in US. This is, I would say, a renaissance in advanced manufacturing in the US, right? We had that again in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It was great. Then we lost a huge amount of manufacturing jobs to overseas, but now they're coming back, but we don't want to bring back the old way, right? The only way we can compete globally is where we raise the bar, right? Internally at Orbital, this is one of our mottos: raise the standard, right? So we as a country, when it comes to automation and manufacturing, we need to raise our standard, which means we need to train everybody. Everybody, should be learning robotics. Like that should be a requirement. I would say even in high schools, right? High schools, community colleges, 4-year colleges. Everybody should have access to robots. Everybody should be learning how to program them.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think one of the only reasons that robotics hasn't had as big of an impact as, like, say, for instance, something like AI is just because the uh, investment is so much higher, right? Like if AI deploys tomorrow and they charge $30 a month, anybody in the world can pretty much afford it. At least anybody in the U.S., right? They can afford it. Um, you know, with that being said, automation is slowly ticking up and taking over. Like it's into the future, it's going to be the same as the discussions we're having with AI and how we're talking about them taking jobs or how jobs are going to change. The exact same things happening with automation, and the discussions have been happening. But I think the technologies are getting there, and I think over the course of the next like 10 years, people are going to start becoming educated enough with things like robotics, like you mentioned, like people should have more access to robotics. Well, it's definitely even since in the past, since I was in high school, like we didn't have a robot in our high school, but I'm starting to hear of multiple like high school level classes having some type of introductory to robotics, um, which is going to change the landscape of the skill level of the individuals that are coming into the industry, as well as the gap closing on the technological side of things just becoming easier to program. right? And at some point in time, we might be able to talk to a chat GPT and have it program a robot for us or program some PLC code to do something. Um, those things are just a matter of time.
It's already happening, and you're hitting it on the nail, right? This is the problem. If you want robotics to be accessible to the masses, to everybody, it needs to be easier to program, right? And the AI tools are actually going to help make that transition and accelerate that transition, so that you know the barrier to entry is lower,
Hmm.
meaning that many more people can jump in
Hmm.
and start uh, make becoming useful, productive with robots.
Yeah.
Now, there is always this advanced high-end sector, which is then become more specialized.
Hmm.
But this low end is very important because this is what pulls people in, right?
Hmm.
When people are young and they're thinking about careers, you know it so my personal job, my favorite class in college was where we had hardware instruments to play with, right?
Yeah.
So and we've shipped actually some of our systems to universities, and the professors have been telling us that the interest in their classes have skyrocketed because the students get to play with actual robots,
Right.
right? So we need to sort of make this exciting, make this accessible. That it's not intimidating, right? That anybody can do it, right? You can do it. High school kids can do it. Honestly, we've had middle school kids who can do this, right? Like
Right.
it's not as intimidating as it
Yeah.
looks, and we need to broaden that pool of potential people who want to be working on this as their career.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. And also too, like some of the things like collaborative robots have added like the capability of at least somebody being able to grab a hold of it and like move the robot around. Like, oh, okay, like then that kind of gets like the head nod of like, okay, maybe I can do something with this, you know? And then go ahead, go ahead.
The sooner somebody can, when they see the robot and they're able to go and do something with it and
Yeah.
see something exciting, I think, at least for new people, that is very exciting. So
Yeah.
when we have people come to our lab, we have many robots in our lab. We actually give them the teach pendant and have them just move the robot. It's very simple, right?
Yeah.
You click a few couple of buttons, but it just even that the excitement on their faces is really wonderful to see.
Yeah.
Even little kids, we can have them do it, right? They
Right.
hold the pendant, click this button, and your robot is moving around, right?
Yeah.
And it just lowers the anxiety that, oh, I can do this. That's not hard,
Right.
right? So that, I think, hands-on engagement in education is
Mm.
really important.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
What are some things that you think people should prepare for as they kind of try to decide like what they want to do as a career?
So I think, in the last couple of decades, software was kind of king, right? Uh, People with software, I would say, sort of got paid artificially high, uh, compared to people on the hardware side that actually work incredibly hard. But I don't think the dollars travel the
Yeah.
mixes, the distribution is correct.
Yeah.
But that's starting to change, right? Because yes, software is important. Software can be enabling in many areas, but hardware matters. At the end
Hmm.
of the day, you're building, we're sitting here on a computer, right? Everything around us is the hardware, the monitor, the
Yep.
laptop, the chips inside, you know, uh, and there's people, working on that day in and
Yeah.
day out, right?
Yep.
To make that happen. So what's happening right now is software is kind of reaching the limit of what it can do
Mm.
in many areas. I'm putting the AI aside, that's a different
Yeah.
category, but just kind of enterprise software in general.
Yep.
So, and they're all reaching that maturity level where you're back to being stuck at the limitations of what your hardware can do.
Yep.
So, what I encourage people to do is, I think this is actually, again, a golden period to be back. on the hardware side, but you want to be well versed on the software as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think diversity of knowledge is important. And there's also, we've noticed people that love to work with their hands. Like they just can't stand sitting in front of a computer. And I want to say that's okay. Don't go, some people will go into this programming or this kind of world just because that's the only way they think they
Make
can make a
money.
living.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I think the balance is shifting back to not 100% hardware, but I would say you want a healthy mix of both hardware and software. So I encourage young people, take classes in these different areas, expose yourself to multiple things, materials, hardware side, take physics, take math, go into chemistry, broaden your scope, because a lot of the innovations are happening where a lot of these different disciplines come together,
Yep.
right? AI also alone can only do so much. At the end of the day, how do you apply it to something,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this multidisciplinary education uh, is important,
Yeah.
and students should seek that as they go through their
Mm-hmm.
education careers, right?
Yeah.
Seek out this diversity of knowledge.
Yeah. Even I think that some of the schools have recognized that a little bit in the sense of like, uh, back whenever I went to college, there wasn't really many like mechatronics type of degrees. Like you kind of either went for the mechanical side of things, electrical or programming side of things. And at the time I went to college, there was a little bit of like programming and electrical, some small things, right? But still like mechatronics of like including all these things together and how they really relate. Um, that wasn't really there, and so like I think it's good that like now like the mechatronics degree is starting to become more popular and more colleges are offering it, because in my opinion it's one of the like best degrees you can get, like at all, really, any sector. It's like 2 years of schooling and you can get a mechatronics degree. Now there's some engineering level mechatronic type of degrees as well, which was like a really, really big one that I felt like was missing, because I think there's a lot of people that still want to go through the accolade part of education. They want to get a maybe even engineering degree. Some just want to get a degree, but like they want to get an engineering degree. And there hasn't really been a lot of good options. But here, and over the past few years, there's been a lot more development in the mechatronic type of like engineering degrees that
Yeah.
are available.
Absolutely, and I think the reason they are interesting and exciting for people is because you're reinforcing this project based learning,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not in just one discipline.
Mm.
You have to cut across and make something real in the end.
Yep.
And to make something real, it involves many things
Yep.
by definition. The other one, I mean, we see like aerospace engineering is very interesting because in aerospace, again, you are forced to think at a system level,
Mm.
which means that you need to actually learn many disciplines.
Yeah.
I would also encourage people to do dual degrees, right? You can actually do
Mm.
a major, let's say, in mechatronics and pick up minor in electrical or computer science,
Mm.
right? There's many hybrid options, and universities again have been open now, and they recognize this, and they're broadening sort of these offerings.
Yeah.
So pick your interest, right? Pick your if you're really interested in one, go after that, but complement it with other areas,
Yeah.
right? So I think that again builds broad set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies, especially like in our domain as a startup, we like people like that. We want more broad people with broad backgrounds that are able to go deep as necessary, but also step back and go after something else, right? Because they have general skills in many areas, and they're able to be very proactively. They can react to whatever is required.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think one other thing to touch on too is like just the uh, as you are going throughout your career to try different things, but to also stick with some things too. So like, you know, uh, I think that there's like a fine line with that, in the sense of, it's like you should taste and decide what it is that you want to do. And then on the other hand, you should start building out like a nice discipline of like some type of skill set that you can say, I have, 10 years of experience doing this. I have 15 years of experience doing this. And then then if you want to make a hard transition to some other industry, um, that if something happens to go wrong in that industry, you decide you don't like it and you want to go back, you can still very easily shift back to the industry that you came from. And then also to add a note, but still don't let like that stop you. Still be willing to take risk and uh, try things out. I would just say be careful of trying too many things where you go through a 20-year career and you've worked in six different industries.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, I think uh, within industries, you want to acquire skills. You don't want to do too many industries to industry jumps. Those are much more difficult. So you want to do that more sparingly, more of a more strategic pivot than anything else. So I have this very simple framework I've used in my entire career, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when I'm going from one position to another, I think about career growth, both in terms of what am I going to learn something that's new. Like again, I actually lead with that as my first priority.
Mm,
What is it that I'm going to learn? Because I think people need to realize learning leads to whatever outcome. We focus too much on outcomes, but if
mm,
you actually focus on just the what is going to make you successful, it's the
mm.
learning, right?
Yep.
So I if I go to a new position, I want to make sure I'm learning something new and I'm
Mm,
growing as a person. I'm growing as my set of skills and capabilities. So learning is one. Second is you do want career growth, but it's not an absolute must for me because I talked about sometimes you have to go down to go up again,
mhm,
right? That's okay. Uh, but the third thing is then also I want to make sure wherever I'm going, I can add value. And it's good to think about that, right?
yep.
That uh, the right place where people can thrive is where they're contributing because that's makes you feel a valuable member of
Yeah.
whichever group you're part of, but also you're learning at the same time.
Mhm.
And if you can do both of those and your career trajectory is in the right place, I mean, you can't beat that,
Yeah.
right? So that has worked wonderful for me, at
Mm.
least in my career.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, those are like some of the underlying things that have made me as successful as I've been in my career. Like some of them are like life philosophies, and some are things that I just did. But one of my philosophies is to always add more value than anybody else around you. So if you're always trying to add the most amount of value that you can, like you can really never go wrong with that. And then for myself, it was like I'm not exactly sure what the driver was, but it was opportunity, it was education, but I basically like picked up like any type of gap that was in the company. I came from like a somewhat smaller company, so there was like always some type of gap, um, and that led me to be able to learn PLC programming, robot programming, electrical engineering, risk assessments, like all these different like engineering disciplines, and I would have never learned all those things if like I didn't take the like initiative to want to learn these new things. And really it was like kind of to help out and fill gaps. That was one of the big things actually. It was like, okay, well the company needs help in this area, I'll do it, whatever, especially when it came to risk assessments.
What you're describing is exactly what I was talking about, right? Because you're number one, you're useful to the company, right? Because and again, didn't matter what the gaps are.
Mm,
I'm here. I'm a team player. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make this company successful,
mhm,
right? But the second thing is, at the same time you're doing good for the company, you're also learning,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And that's wonderful. That's actually, people don't recognize how, see, everybody is growing. The company is benefiting, but you're personally growing
Hmm.
and accumulating skill sets that are going to serve you for the rest of your career, right? And actually, the natural outcome of those two things is that your career will progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like we just dropped some like very valuable nuggets of information. But before we get out of here today, is there any other valuable informations that you'd like to share?
Um, I just want people to, back to my central message, right? Growth mindset. Uh, we live in a challenging world. There's always it ways to get yourself down, or ways to lift yourself up. And I think we as individuals, we live in the best country in the world. We have all the resources at our fingertips. We do. And but it's about our mindset. If we start with a positive mindset, we can overcome anything. And I know, again, we as a country have lost so much of the manufacturing jobs over time, and it's caused real pain in lives of so many people. So I want to acknowledge that. But I'm trying to say, this is the best time to be in manufacturing. As long as you come in with that fresh, positive energy and perspective, this is an incredible time to be in this space. And I think we as a country is going to thrive the more we bring these jobs back and focus on our core competencies.
Yeah. One other thing that I don't think a lot of people are discussing on too much is I think one thing that US manufacturers are going to have as a positive, as a pro, is because of COVID, because of remote working. One thing that I'm definitely predicting and seeing is that over it may take 10 to 20 years, but I think we're going to start to see more of a balance in labor rates. So
Yes.
whereas like we're outsourcing a lot of things to Mexico and India and China and for like low labor rates, right? That's the fact of why they're getting outsourced to these other countries. I think that the gap is going to close some because it's going to start with some of your skilled jobs, maybe creators, video editors, things like that, where you know there's going to be companies that are sourcing people from all over the world. It's been happening for some time, but I don't think it's been globally done and been done by mass majority of companies. But with this new remote working culture that is kind of came to with COVID, um, I think it's definitely going to kind of change the landscape of what pay rates look like and kind of how we function as like a global economy.
Yeah, we want to upskill, right? Raise the standard. We want everybody here to raise their skills. And there's a wonderful example. Like if you go to Denmark, and I had the privilege to go there a few times, uh, the amount of automation in Denmark is remarkable. There's even a city called Odense, which has the highest concentration of robotic companies. And it's a tiny city of 200,000 people.
Mm,
And but why are they so good? It's a country of, I think their population is like less than 5 million people. It's tiny, tiny. I mean, that's nothing, right?
yep.
So by necessity, yeah, and they have many months of winter, right? Which is parts of the US is true, right? So what do? They automate the hell out of everything.
Hmm.
Everything is automated. You come out, come through the airport. There's robots running around everywhere.
Mm,
The moment we step out of the airport, the lawns are perfect because there's robots running around mowing the lawns, right? Like everything is automated
mm,
now because they upskilled, right? now they become the net exporters of those technologies to the rest of the world.
Right.
This is how you build a high value economy,
Mm.
right? We want to be net exporters of these highly
Technology.
skilled
Yeah.
capabilities and technologies.
Mm.
That's where, that's the only way we can compete, right? You cannot compete at a human capacity level. We just don't have the enough people. Even if US doubled its population, you still can't compete.
Right.
Triple, you still can't compete, right? So the only way is we have to raise the standard, upskill, and that's when, as a country, we can keep that competitive edge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for being with us today. Where can people find you at?
We're based in Silicon Valley in a town called Campbell. We're about a walking distance block away from Netflix headquarters, if that helps. But go to orbitalcomposites.com or send me an email directly, Amolak, Amolak, at orbitalcomposites.com. And if you are into robotics and additive manufacturing, composites, reach out. We're one of the best in the world.
Awesome. Thank you again for being with us today, and thank you for dropping the value bombs.
Thank you, and thank you for the invite. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I would love to come see you sometime. You're based in Indiana, right?
Yep. Southern Indiana.
Okay, I will. Next time I'm in Indiana, I'll reach out.
Good deal. Are you going to
And
Automate?
it's
Will you be at Automate?
one of our team members might be.
Okay.
I don't think I will be there. We
Okay.
have so many conferences ongoing.
Yeah. All right.
But if you're in Silicon Valley, shoot me a note. Come over.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.